The Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played by Irving Chernev. Game 24, Coup de Grace. White is Alexander Alekhine. Black is F.D. Yates. London, 1922. Queen's Gambit declined. Even the mighty Alekhine, who played more brilliant games than any other man who ever lived, did not pluck combinations out of thin air. Even he had to abide by Lasker's dictum. In the beginning of the game, ignore the search for combinations, abstain from violent moves, aim for small advantages, accumulate them, and only after having attained these ends search for the combination, and then with all the power of will and intellect, because then the combinations must exist, however deeply hidden. Note how Alekhine, ever alert for opportunity, anchors pieces on strong squares, seizes open files, doubles rooks on the 7th rank, and centralizes his king. Centralizes his king? Good heavens! Alekhine's king walks up the board practically in the mid-game and steals a rook in broad daylight. If there are combinations to be found, and Lasker assures us there are, Alekhine is the man who can find them. Pawn to queen 4, knight to king's bishop 3, pawn to queen's bishop 4, pawn to king 3, knight to king's bishop 3, pawn to queen 4, knight to bishop 3, bishop to king 2, bishop to knight 5, castles, pawn to king 3, queen's knight to queen 2. White has a happy time of it in this line of the Queen's Gambit. All he has to do to get a good game is make natural moves. Black, on the other hand, usually has trouble developing the pieces on the queen side. The queen knight stands awkwardly at queen 2 and shuts in the bishop. Bringing the knight out at queen's bishop 3, though, would be far worse. It would block the bishop pawn, whose job it is to attack the center, by pawn to bishop 4, while the plight of the queen bishop would not be mitigated. It would still be shut in. Rook to bishop 1, pawn to bishop 3, queen to bishop 2, rook to king 1, bishop to queen 3, pawn takes pawn. With this move and the next, Capablanca's freeing maneuver, Black has a fair chance of achieving equality. Other lines are less promising. For example, pawn to queen's rook 3 in order to get counterplay on the queen side by, let's say white plays castles, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, pawn to queen knight 4, bishop to queen 3, pawn to bishop 4. Back to the beginning of the variation. White responds, pawn takes pawn, exclamation point. King's pawn takes pawn. Not knight takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn, check, winning a pawn. The position is in white's favor. After white plays bishop to queen 3, other lines include pawn to king's rook 3, bishop to bishop 4, exclamation point, pawn to rook 3, pawn takes pawn, exclamation point, knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, king pawn takes pawn, king pawn takes knight, castles, knight to bishop 3, pawn to king's rook 3, and white can play for the minority attack by rook to knight 1, pawn to queen's knight 4, pawn to queen rook 4, and pawn to knight 5 with good winning chances. Back to the game. Bishop takes pawn, knight to queen 4, knight to king 4. Theorists, including Alekhine, consider bishop takes bishop to be white's best move, but Alekhine often plays inferior moves or little analyzed moves to throw his opponents on their own resources or to bring about complications in which they are not quite at home. Back to the game. Black plays pawn to king's bishop 4. This move is not good since it weakens his black squares and saddles black with a backward king pawn. An enemy knight can establish itself on his king 4 square without fear of being driven away by pawns. From this point, says Alekhine, black's game may be considered strategically lost, which is not to say that the realization of victory will be an easy matter. A preferable defense was bishop takes bishop, knight on king 4 takes bishop, knight to bishop 1, though black still faced the prospect of a long, hard winter. Back to the game. White plays bishop takes bishop. Black replies queen takes bishop. Queen's knight to queen 2. Pawn to queen rook 4. Another strategical error, and again an important black square, queen's bishop 4, is weakened. White, as we shall see, utilizes this square as a pivot for his pieces, the knight, the queen, and then one of the rooks. White also obtains control of the only open file. It makes a fine avenue of entry into the adverse position. Bishop takes knight, exclamation point. Very good. Alekhine gets rid of a knight, which is posted strongly in the center, and prepares to operate on the open file. Bishop pawn takes bishop. Castles. Pawn to queen's rook 4. Knight to knight 3. This must be played at once, as otherwise pawn to rook 5 keeps the knight out. The knight is of course headed for queen's bishop 5, the magic square. Pawn to rook 5. Knight to bishop 5. This forces an exchange of knights, after which white's other knight can settle on bishop 5 or on king 5 without fear of being disturbed. Knight takes knight. Queen takes knight, exclamation point, the right way to capture. Weak points or holes in the opponent's position, says Tarrasch, must be occupied by pieces, not by pawns. Queen takes queen. Rook takes queen. White has the advantage in force, space, and time. In force, the knight, which will be posted unassailably at king 5, supported by a pawn is stronger than a bishop, especially this one, which is limited purely to defense. In space, his rooks will dominate the only open file. In time, 2 of his pieces are in active play, while black has none. Pawn to knight 5, king's rook to bishop 1, bishop to rook 3. Black hopes to oppose rooks on the queen-bishop file. This is the position with white to play. Knight to king 5 exclamation point. The knight arrives just in time to put a stop to any such fancies. If black tries to dispute possession of the bishop file, by king's rook to bishop 1, the continuation would be rook takes rook check, rook takes rook, rook takes rook check, bishop takes rook, knight to bishop 6, and the attack on the knight pawn, as well as the threat of winning the bishop by knight to king 7 check, would gain a pawn for white. After knight to king 5, back to the game. Black plays king's rook to knight 1, pawn to bishop 3 exclamation point. Another advantage for white, he can bring his king into active play, while black's king may not emerge. Pawn to knight 6, pawn to queen's rook 3, pawn to rook 3. If here, rook to queen's bishop 1, rook takes rook check, rook takes rook, rook takes rook check, bishop takes rook, king to bishop 2, king to bishop 1, king to queen 1, king to king 1, king to king 2, king to queen 2, king to queen 3, king to bishop 3, and black cannot save his queen rook pawn. Back to the game. King to bishop 2 exclamation point. The starting point of mate threats in which the king himself takes part. King to rook 2, pawn to rook 4, rook to king's bishop 1. Black still cannot oppose rooks. Rook to queen's bishop 1, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, knight to queen 3, bishop to queen 2, knight to bishop 5, and black loses either his king pawn or his queen rook pawn. Back to the game. King to knight 3, rook on bishop 1 to queen's knight 1. Black can do nothing but wait and hope. Rook to bishop 7. The chief advantage of the possession of an open file, says the good book, is that the rook may be able to penetrate to the 7th rank. Bishop to knight 4. Rook on bishop 1 to bishop 5 exclamation point. Intends the following maneuver. Rook to king 7. Let's say black wastes a move. Rook to king 7. Rook to king 1. to king's bishop 7, rook on 1, rook on rook 1 to knight 1 to protect the bishop, rook on bishop 5 to bishop 7, and the rooks are doubled on the 7th rank. After 27, rook to bishop 7, and rook on bishop 1 to bishop 5. Black plays bishop to rook 3, rook on bishop 5 to bishop 6. Step by step, white approaches his goal. Black must protect his king pawn as an attempt to exchange rooks by rook to queen's bishop 1 loses instantly to rook takes bishop, and white wins a piece. Rook to king 1, king to bishop 4 exclamation point. Now that the doubling of his rooks cannot be prevented, Alekhine takes time to bring his king closer to the center. King to knight 1, pawn to rook 5 exclamation point. Tightens the net around the king, black's of course. Bishop to bishop 8, pawn to knight 3, bishop to rook 3. If bishop to king 7 instead, white protects the bishop pawn by bringing his knight to king's knight 6, and then knight to king's rook 4, after which he moves his king to king 5, winning the king pawn as a start. Back to the game. Rook to bishop 7, king to rook 2, rook on bishop 6 to bishop 7. At last the rooks are doubled. What remains now is to break through the last barrier, the knight pawn that shields the king. Rook to king's knight 1, knight to queen 7 exclamation point. Threatens to win the exchange by knight to bishop 6 check. King to rook 1. Now comes a brilliant combination with characteristic Alekhine sting at the tail end of it. This is the position with white to play. Knight to bishop 6 exclamation point. Rook on knight 1 to king's bishop 1. Of course not. Pawn takes knight as rook to rook 7 is mate on the spot, but black's actual move seems to force an exchange of rooks. Rook takes pawn exclamation point. This calls for 2 exclamation points. Rook takes knight. King to king 5 exclamation point. The point of the combination. White wins a whole rook. If black moves rook to king's bishop 1, he is mated in 2 moves by rook to rook 7 check, king to knight 1, rook on bishop 7 to knight 7 mate. So after king to king 5, black resigns.